Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. Welcome to today's video, which is going to be all about kind of the transitions from pens, insulin pens to an insulin pump. I'm now about 5 weeks into using the insulin pump, and so I thought now would be kind of a good time to like do a bit of an evaluation and kind of tell you my experience and what you might be able to expect changing from pens to pump, because although there were some things I was expecting, there were some things I definitely wasn't expecting, and so yeah, it's kind of like a heads up from me to you as to what this journey could look like. I do have two disclaimers, the same one you probably heard in my last 4 or 5 videos, which is that I started the pump 2 days before I then got infected with COVID, and so that obviously makes the whole journey quite a lot different. I was very ill for a couple of weeks, and I then also after that, like a couple of days after that, I then got the coil, which had a massive impact on my blood sugars, which again affected my kind of journey from pens to pump, because it threw a lot of things up in the air, and so that is something that I hope most of you will not be facing COVID when getting a pump. And the second thing to say is that obviously this is my experience, it won't be the same for everyone. It will also be very different depending on what type of pump you're getting, and your own personal body and your own personal diabetes management. So yeah, this is just a heads up of a couple of things to expect. I'm also going to do a kind of solid pros and cons of pump versus MDI once I'm more months into the journey and have a proper understanding of the pump and exactly how it works and the best ways to make use of it. So this video isn't that, it's not going to be like a pros and cons, it's more of like the good, the bad and the ugly of going from MDI to pump. First thing that I want to say is that obviously I had mentally prepared myself for a lot of fluctuations, to have a lot worse control than normal for a while as you get used to something new, because no matter how good a control you start with, whenever you try something new as a diabetic, it's going to throw things up in the air and make things a bit difficult. However, one thing I will say was I wasn't expecting the kind of experiment phase to last quite this long, and I also wasn't expecting the bad days to be quite as bad as they were. Obviously I did have a lot of good days, however I did have some bad days that were particularly bad. If you've seen my last vlog, that will kind of give you an indication of the kind of feelings I was going through, but I was getting very frustrated and very angry when, yeah, previously like a high blood sugar for me was around 13, but when I was transitioning to the pump and working out new things, I was going up to 20 to 27, which is very unusual for me, very scary given the fact that I'm going on pump to get better diabetes control, and it was a decision that was kind of sparked by my retinopathy diagnosis. To then be seeing numbers like that, although it's like short-term pain for long-term gain, it was very scary. It also made me feel very unwell because, like I said, my body is definitely not used to these kind of numbers, and I did feel quite ill some of the time. I had to rearrange a lot of my gym schedule sometimes because I would wake up so high I would feel too sick to train, and so I'd have to kind of bear that in mind. So yeah, that is one thing. Obviously I was prepared to have like higher blood sugars, but I was thinking more of like having like stubborn numbers around 13 to 15, not like 12 hours where I couldn't get myself below 20. So although I kind of mentally prepared myself for that, I think it's important to prepare yourself even more so, and expect just horrendous numbers. But again, like I say, it's short-term pain for long-term gain, and that definitely wasn't every day. That would happen every few days, and so there definitely were good days during the kind of initial experimental phase, as well as these kind of horrendously bad blood sugar days. And that kind of leads me on to the point as well that I was kind of expecting to be given these instructions and everything would work as it said it was supposed to work, but I think we all know with diabetes technology that's actually rarely the case. So the pump I'm on, I'm supposed to be able to change the infusion site every 3 days and the reservoir every 4 days, depending on how much insulin you take. It's only a 200 unit reservoir, so that only lasted me 3 days anyway. But I kept finding, like I was saying, I was having these incredibly high blood sugars that wouldn't come down, and then I was tracking it, and it would often happen like overnight, or it would happen like partway through day number 3, and I realised that this pump actually for me doesn't really last that long. Either the reservoir will go or my infusion site, I guess, becomes less effective and I have to change it every 2 days, and since I started changing every 2 days, I've not gone above 20. Like, I've not had any of those highs. Like, yes, I still have had highs from kind of still doing the other experimental tweaks like basal rate changes and that kind of thing, but those severe highs that were caused from essentially I just wasn't getting my insulin, because yeah, my pump either wasn't delivering it, like the reservoir had failed and it didn't alert me, or my infusion site had just become ineffective, because I guess my body just deals with cannulas and stuff differently and becomes resistant around that area or whatever. I don't know what it is, but I have to change my reservoir and my infusion site every 2 days, which is something I wasn't expecting, and I'm now having to kind of get my diabetes clinic to make arrangements with the manufacturer to deliver my consumables regularly enough that I can do that. So that's one thing I wasn't expecting. I was expecting it to be like, these are the rules, go ahead and do it, but no, that's just not how it worked for me. And then on that note, because of having to change my pump so regularly, even if I go away for one night, if that night falls on a pump change, which is like a 50% chance, I then have to take quite a lot of stuff with me. So I have to take everything for a pump change, plus I take 2 reservoirs and 2 cannulas, or I take like double the amount I would need in case one fails, because I did have one while I was at home a couple of weeks ago where I took the reservoir out of the packet and it was broken, like a part of it was just missing. So obviously you don't want to get there and open it and like part of it's missing. So having to pack all of that pump stuff on top of the normal diabetes supplies, because I also took my insulin pens in case the pump completely failed. That did take up a lot of room in my bag when I went for like one night away. So that is one thing to kind of keep in mind, and also the fact that these pump supplies are big boxes, and I'm now going to be bulk delivered quite a few to like last me one every 2 days. So finding space in your cupboards for all of that is a little challenge in itself. And then on top of that, like I was saying, like my major highs have now disappeared now that I'm changing every 2 days, but I do still have the odd high from still not being quite like exactly on top of the pump functions. So part of that is basal rates and fine-tuning those basal rates at a different time of day, and part of it is that I'm someone who's quite confident with trying new diabetes things, so I'm quite happy to go all in, whereas I know a lot of people take a while to experiment with like temporary basals or extended boluses or that kind of stuff, whereas I'm like, I want to make as much use of this thing as possible as soon as possible. So I jumped right in with temporary basals and all that. However, because I was so like ready to go, I think a lot of the time I went too extreme with them, which led to a lot of fluctuating blood sugars. So for example, if I went low, sometimes I'd put on a temporary basal to reduce my basal insulin while I was recovering from the low, to kind of help it speed up, which does work well. However, I would then leave that temporary basal on for too long and then I'd go high, or on the opposite, overnight. Also, because I had those few nights when the high was due to the pump not working and I didn't realise, I would shoot myself up to 250% basal on those nights and nothing would happen. And so I thought, right, in order to correct a high and alter my basal, I need to alter it by a big percentage to have any kind of effect. And then obviously it turned out it wasn't the basal rate, it was the fact that the pump had failed, but in the back of my mind I'm still thinking that I need to do big jumps. So overnight sometimes I'll correct and then I'll also put on a temporary basal and I'll do about 130%, because I think that's not very much, because I'm used to doing 250%, but actually 130% basal is quite a lot. So I've had a lot of nights now where I've gone like just above range, I've done a correction and a temporary basal, and then I go low. And obviously I don't do a temporary basal every time I go high, but often overnight when I'm going high, my overnights are generally quite steady, or they used to be. And when I'm going high, it's because I'm having like hormonal fluctuations, and it means that I'm moving into the next phase of my cycle. So I'm starting to become insulin resistant, or like on the flip side, normally if I go low overnight, it's because I'm becoming insulin sensitive, flipping onto the other side of my cycle. So yeah, normally if I have an overnight high, if there's no obvious cause for it, like if I know I haven't had like a carb heavy meal, or like a very like a takeaway or something, and I know all of my carbs should have been digested way before going to bed, I'm getting a high in the middle of the night, I normally assume it's because I'm becoming insulin resistant. And that's why I do a temporary basal, because I want to kind of counteract that from kind of continuing to creep up. But yeah, I just sometimes do too much of a temporary basal and then I crash, which doesn't help. So having those fluctuations from just being a bit like too hot and heavy with my temporary basals and my corrections is something I'm working on. I need to remember that I don't actually need to do a temporary basal by so much, it's just the fact that at the beginning my insulin just simply wasn't going in at all, and you don't actually probably ever need to do 250%. Kind of on that note, like I mentioned, my nights used to be pretty steady. Now obviously kind of working out new basal rates for the pump, I did go 2 weeks without sleeping through the night at one point. I'm currently on another phase of doing that because things went all up in the air again because of my hormonal fluctuations and stuff, and we're just working out the new profile. So yeah, I got the coil and then had a period and then got another one like 2 weeks later, which sucks in general, but also for diabetes, like it's trying to work out how that now affects me, because also my period fluctuations aren't the same as they used to be. So before, when I got my period, I'd go resistant a couple of days before, and then when my period started I'd get very sensitive, whereas now I'm just resistant the whole time, which is annoying. So like working that out on top of changing over to the pump has meant that I've had a lot of sleepless nights. But the initial I had 2 weeks of where I was waking up 2 to 3 times each night, every night, while I couldn't work out why I kept going high, and it was the fault of the pump and having to change every 2 days, not every 3. But going through that, like, it does really take a toll on you. I was really tired, and like really low energy for a while, so that was a bit of a struggle, but now we've worked that out. I tend to only have one alarm per night if I'm having one, and that is due to like my body. And the good thing about the pump is the fact that now we're kind of working out how my body responds to these different things. I can now set up basal rate profiles for each of these different scenarios, and the next time it happens, hopefully things will be smooth sailing, or if they're not smooth sailing, they'll at least be better. So say for example, like this time I was really high for a couple of days because I kept expecting that next day to be the day where I became sensitive, and it never came. So now I know that I'm just going to be resistant the whole time. I can have a basal rate already programmed in for my pump for that, and as soon as that happens, when I'm expecting my period, it normally happens like 2-3 days before. As soon as that happens, I can put that basal rate on, and I can know that I can leave that basal rate until my period then finishes, or like a day or 2 before it's due to finish, and that can all be sorted. So that is one thing I'm really excited for, that obviously a lot of the benefits of the pump come later on, once you've got these different basal rates set up and once you know how it responds to you. And on that note, in terms of like things being a bit different and the way I manage my diabetes being different, one thing I wasn't expecting going to the pump was that I have to do a whole new routine for my training sessions than I did on MDI, because obviously on MDI you've just got like a background insulin, very low profile, whereas on the pump you've got a constant stream of fast acting insulin. So by the time I get to the gym, I've got quite a lot of fast acting insulin on board, and the first few times I went to the gym I made it about halfway through the workout before having to stop, because I'd have hypo after hypo after hypo. So before on MDI, whereas I would wake up and I would have either 2 or 1.5 units of Nova Rapid with my pre-workout banana, depending on which type of session I was doing. I now have to wake up, I have to suspend my pump as soon as I wake up. I normally don't start exercising until like 50 minutes after I've woken up, by the time I've gotten ready and I've got to the gym. And then I have my banana, and now I have normally between 0.5 and 1.5 units of insulin with my banana, depending on like how high I am when I wake up, instead of 1.5 or 2 units. And then obviously I take my pump with me onto the gym floor, and then when I start to creep above 7, I can then turn off my pump suspension. So instead of being on 0% basal, I then put my basal back to normal. And if for whatever reason I have spiked during that session, because you know diabetes doesn't follow the rules all the time, I can then do a bolus injection from the gym. Like, I've got my pump with me and I can just type it in. I can literally do it in 30 seconds between sets, and not waste any time, and just have a little correction while I'm in the gym. And I like doing that as well if I'm high, because I am in the gym and exercising and moving my body, it then comes down a lot quicker than normal. So that's been really helpful, but that's something I wasn't expecting, such a drastic change. And although it doesn't sound like a big change, it is quite a big change for me, because, oh yeah, also part of that is the fact that after the gym, when I was on MDI, I would then have to massively reduce my bolus insulin for my breakfast. However, with this current plan, when I suspend my insulin before the gym session, and obviously I don't do this if I start and I'm already high, but when I do suspend my insulin in the morning, because I've then got no background insulin on for up to 2 hours, I was then spiking a lot after breakfast. So I was reducing my bolus as I used to do, after the gym, and then I was having a massive spike after breakfast, but it's because I didn't have any background insulin on board at all, and I hadn't had much fast-acting insulin. If I then reduced my breakfast bolus, I had like no insulin on board to cover those carbs, and so now I barely have to reduce my post-workout insulin dose, whereas before I used to have to massively reduce it. And I do still reduce it a bit, it just depends on my blood sugars on the day and yeah, what training session I've done. But yeah, all of those different factors I had nailed down completely, and then not really having a plan going into exercise again on the pump was a bit scary, but now I've got it down. I found what works for me, and yeah, we're slowly building there. I've also found out that I have to have a completely separate, very, very, very different plan for exercise when I'm on my period, because I do go very resistant, and I have to kind of, I don't have to suspend my pump, I just keep it on as normal because I go very high. So that's another thing that I'm like working out at the moment as well. But another thing that I am loving about the pump is that, like I said, I can bolus from the gym floor if I need to, if I'm high. And also, I can bolus on the go, which is amazing. So sometimes, if I finish my workout, my blood sugars are like between 6 and 7. If I bolus before I leave the gym, I'd be hypo by the time I got home. But if I wait until I get home to bolus, I then have to wait a while before I can eat to have my pre-bolus kick in. Whereas now I've got my pump on me, I can bolus halfway along the walk home, which means that by the time I'm home, I can eat as soon as I open the door and get my oats in the microwave. So that's something that's like really simple, but it's actually so nice, and I am really appreciating those little moments where, like, for example, also, I always go for a walk after my lunch. I have to split my lunchtime bolus dose so that I don't go hypo on my walk. But sometimes I was finding on MDI, if like I left it a bit longer before I went on my walk, then I would go quite high before, or sometimes if I underestimated the pre-bolus split versus the post like walk split, then I'd go high on my walk. Whereas now, if I leave the house and I'm a little bit elevated, that's fine, and normally it will come down. But if it doesn't come down, I can then just do more of my bolus while I'm on my walk, and then it will come down really quickly again because I'm moving. So being able to bolus on the go has been so helpful. And equally on the reverse of that, I often, if I was like walking in the middle of the day, like at the weekend we do that quite a lot, I would go hypo on MDI, or I'd have to eat loads. Whereas now, if I know I'm going to go on a walk, I can put on a temporary basal, or even like suspend my pump completely and go on my walk and not have those hypos. Granted, I haven't got that process down to a T yet. I'm still working like on timings and how much exactly I need to reduce my basal by. But even like the few experimental ones that I've done so far have been so good, because it is annoying when you just want to go for a walk and you just keep going hypo, whereas being able to suspend my pump like an hour in advance to prevent those hypos, because I don't have any insulin on board, has been amazing. But yeah, like I said, I just need to fine tune like how long in advance I need to reduce my basal, the percentage I need to reduce it by, and then at what point in the walk do I start putting my basal back on. Because again, I was finding I was like then waiting too long to put my basal back to normal, and then I was having quite a few highs after my walk. So that's again something I need to work on. So it's like all these little tiny fine details that are going to be such an improvement in the future, and some of them are already being an improvement now. It's like quite a process to like fine tune them and get them exactly right, so that you have that foolproof concrete plan for any time you do a specific activity or have a specific food. So that is one thing. And the other last thing I'm going to mention on this video, because I don't want to talk for too long, and again I am going to do the pros and the cons. One thing that has been amazing transitioning to the pump is I had a pizza and I didn't go above 9.5, which is unheard of. And before, I've only ever done that once before on MDI when I had a takeaway, and that involved 5 or 6 injections, whereas being able to do my extended bolus on the pump has been amazing. And like I did kind of more of a conservative like pre-bolus, and like a very long time frame to like spread out the bolus. But then if I found that I was creeping up, I could then just go in and cancel it and put in a new bolus and start again to get the insulin moving a bit quicker, and having like several like shots at, and like I don't know how to explain it, like instead of having one bolus before eating and then having it spread over the rest of it spread over say 10 hours, if after 2 hours I went high, I would then take say another 30% of that dose straight up and have the rest of it going over the next 6 or 7 hours. So being able to alter as I went, depending on how my blood sugars reacted, was amazing. And then yeah, equally, if I saw myself dipping, I would then cancel the bolus and then just start it going again once I started to raise, because I know, I say this all the time, but I have a really slow digestion and it takes me approximately 12 to 18 hours to digest a pizza. So I know that even if I go low at say 2 AM, I've probably still got more to digest. So I don't want to cancel the dose completely, but I just want to like pause it and then start it again later. So having the ability to kind of control my bolus so precisely and go with the flow for meals like pizzas and takeaways has been amazing, and it's really kind of taken the burden off of those social events, and made me feel like less guilty for eating those kind of foods, because I feel like it's less of a self-sabotage, and you should 100% enjoy those foods on MDI. You should 100% find a routine that works for you. But because of my digestion and it taking 5 to 6 injections to manage that, and obviously a lot of maths in it just was more of a hassle for me than a pleasure to eat those kind of foods. Whereas now the pump stores all of the past data from all previous boluses, can take that into consideration when doing calculations. I don't have to do nearly as much maths, don't have to stab myself 6 times, and it allows those moments to be pleasurable again. So that is something I'm so grateful for. So yeah, I realised this video probably started a bit negative, but I did want to just kind of give you a very real and realistic overview of a couple of problems that you may face. But I will say overall, I am loving having the pump. Like I said, there's still lots of things I need to iron out, lots of tweaks to be doing, but it has given me a lot more freedom. It's taken away freedom in some respects of being tied to times for doing site changes, but I think that's well worth it for the other aspects of joy and pizza that I have gained. So yeah, I hope you guys found this video useful if you're thinking of switching over to a pump. Like I said, I'm going to do a full like pros versus cons of MDI and pump later, when I'm like 100% feel like I know the pump like the back of my hand. And I will also do a full review of the pump I'm on, which is the Roche Solo Micro Pump. But again, I'm going to wait until I've got all of my information and all of my kind of experiences under my belt before I do that. I'm going to stop rambling here. That is it for this one, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!